I don't think I was as excited with anyone as I was with Adrienne Marie Brown because you would have thought that we had casted Frederick Douglass. I was like, I can't believe we have a real life abolitionist.
Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna DeShawn here with another exclusive interview, and I know you're gonna love this one. And even if you don't, this is one where I'm just gonna enjoy it, okay? I don't even think I've prepared questions because they all up here. That's what's happening right now. Family, I want to welcome our special guest today, Jana. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, the moment I heard about Red for Revolution, I was like, okay, let me get into this. The first episode dropped. I was like, okay,
Wow.
I'm in. I'm in. Let's go. Now, family, okay, I'm talking a lot because I really am excited about this interview. I got lots of questions. But I want you to know, Jana is the writer, director, and lyricist behind Red for Revolution. This is her baby. And so having the opportunity to chat with her about this work is really, really fantastic. So welcome to the show, Jana.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
For sure. Now, Red for Revolution, as it said on the website, okay, it's an audio drama about love and liberation. It is a 6-part audio drama. It is a coming of age story. Yes, a young Black lesbian juxtaposed with her grandmother's lesbian love story that took place in like the 60s. And it's beautiful. That's all I'm going to say about that part. But Jana, why did you want to tell this particular story?
Well, essentially, there are numerous iterations of Red for Revolution, and the first one that I wrote was a short film that I needed to write for a graduate school application. And essentially, the application required me to write towards a prompt, and that prompt was love at first sight. I sort of wanted to write something that was quite different and not as corny as, the typical boy meets girl, or even just I didn't want to write about romantic love or even platonic love, period. I sort of wanted to flip that on its head, and I chose to write about love of revolution and love for the pursuit of justice. And so I wrote a little scene, and that scene is in every iteration of this project, from that short to the pilot I wrote to the audio drama that you all are now listening to, and it's in episode 1. And then a few years ago, this story was like sitting in a vault upon like witnessing a profound amount of homophobia, transphobia, and just a lot of violence and attacks against the queer community really struck a nerve with me and compelled me to try to save the world single-handedly through a podcast. I sort of was sitting with a lot of that and tried to think of a way that I could lend my artistic contribution essentially to the struggle for queer justice.
Okay, now I want to know what part of episode 1 is the part that has carried over in every iteration.
So it's the scene when they're at the rally in Gary, and Ella has just finished her speech, and she's asking Lorraine what she thought about it, and Lorraine goes, I think I'm in love, and then Ella's like, with me, and then she's like, no, I think I'm in love with this revolutionary thing that you all are talking about. So it's that scene, and that's the scene that I wrote for grad school, and that's essentially where all of this started.
I love it. Okay. And now it was a film, a short. And so tell me,
Mhm.
is filmmaking the first love here? Storytelling by film?
Yeah, filmmaking is I guess it is my first love, technically. I don't want to say that with my full chest, just in case it's not. Maybe it's books. I don't write books, but as far as my craft is concerned and the things that I write, film is what I gravitated towards. It's what I studied in school. It's what I wrote first. I wrote a short film, and then I adapted that short film into a television pilot. And so the initial goal was for this to be a story for the screen, but that is very hard to make. It's very expensive, and you really have to have the right people in your corner, and you have to have the money people in your corner. You have to have the studios. There's no such thing as independent television either. There's independent film, and you can do an audio project independently, but there isn't really a trajectory or a path for independent television. I essentially, tried to create something that I knew I could make, and adapting something that was meant for television into an audio form was much more accessible.
Indeed. And What work did you do to adapt it from being a film to being an audio drama? And I imagine it's pretty similar, but I imagine there's a lot of differences as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there are quite a few differences, and I really got to give a shout out to Rachel Jarvis, and she's another Black woman audio creator, and a good friend of mine. I saw that she had done an audio series herself, and I reached out to her to see if she would give me advice and pointers on how to sort of embark on the same journey. And she did, and I learned quite a bit. I do not write sonically. In fact, I didn't even think the pilot was adaptable into the audio form because it's such a visual piece. I think people will be quite shocked by how visual that the initial story is. But essentially, you sort of have to write in an onomatopoeia sort of form and really pay attention to sound. And I didn't have enough. My intention was to try to carry out the pilot that I wrote for 6 episodes. And that just that wasn't enough material to warrant 6 episodes of an audio series. The initial concept that I had only took place in the 70s. There wasn't a present day storyline. So with this iteration, there is the present day storyline. There wasn't a granddaughter and, this sort of element in the initial version. So that was something that sort of manifested upon witnessing a lot of things happening at the moment in 2022, the political moment that we were in. And then, of course, I just needed more stories because I didn't have enough in that pilot.
Oh, heard, and I'm glad you did. I think the juxtaposition is really refreshing, right? I
Yeah,
don't think we spend enough time with our elders. And so I think the fact that she was creating a podcast inside of a podcast, I mean, that's meta alone by itself. But
right.
then for her to be able to talk with her grandmother and about her sexuality, right? And to tell her story and sort of come out and the challenges she was having and all these things. I just think it was just, I'm glad it came together in the way that it did. I think it
Yeah,
helps to round out the story, at least from an audio perspective, I think in a very beautiful way. As somebody who has also produced podcasts, child, it still costs money. and 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 I honestly haven't seen an audio drama in our space that's had this many celebrities lined
mhm,
up since Bronzeville.
yeah,
Because we all know that paying people is the most expensive part of any project. So you got to
mhm,
tell us, how did this come about? You're like, I want to do a pilot. I can't, this doesn't seem to be coming together the way I want. I got a friend who does audio dramas. Let me talk to her. And then what happens in between? Okay, I think I can do this. And we are starting pre production on
right.
Red Revolution.
Right. That's a great question. So essentially, I set out to do this by myself in a closet with the help of my dear friend Rachel Jarvis. But thankfully, I met my executive producer Renee Wilson, she plays one of the leads, Lorraine Giovanni, in the 70s. And we met a few years ago. We both got into a filmmaking program that ended up really being a hot mess, and we both backed out of that program. It was quite a disaster, but in any case, we met through that, and I reached out to her because I knew she was a music worker, and I wanted to know if she knew of any musicians in New York City. I was living in New York City at the time. I'm going to do this project in New York, and she essentially got back to me and said, I want to help you make this. And I did not know that she had the capability to sort of come on as an executive producer and fund the project. But we've had a single financier, and it's Renee and her production company, Metamana Media. So together we embarked on this journey, and we eventually, our amazing director, Tammy L. Hall, came on board. That's someone Renee brought on board. It's a good friend of hers. And then our producer, Liz McBee, came on board not too long after Tammy. And essentially, the four of us came together to bring the story and the show to life. But funny enough, the talent didn't cost the most. I don't think that once the numbers sort of come out, that is that'll be the biggest sort of line item, simply because, and this is quite an injustice, but the rates for voice work, the SAG rates are not that high. So we're independent production. We offered what we could offer talent, but it wasn't, what they're accustomed to making. And everybody just really, for whatever reason, gravitated towards the story and said yes, despite the fact that, we were an independent production, and despite the fact that we very limited experience in the audio space. And I definitely did look at Bronzeville as the model. That's
Mhm.
another really great Black centered period piece
Yeah.
with, really amazing talent. Everyone
Mhm.
and their mother was in Bronzeville.
Everybody and their
Um,
mama, okay? Lawrence Fishburne,
literally.
Tika Sumpter. I mean, the Tate brothers executive
Right,
produced
right.
it. I mean, it was like, how in the world you get all these people in one place?
Exactly. So we definitely looked at that show and, we were off with the races. It really helped to have Renee come on board, and she really wanted to see the project reach its potential and was willing to make the investment so that it could get there. And so we could have the cast and we could have the caliber of the sound quality and, essentially a really excellent product.
I know you kind of glanced over it, but family, I really want to just sit in the fact that you all started in a program that you all define as terrible, as awful, okay? And out of that, reminds me of like Tupac's Rose from Concrete or something. Like, out of that waste of time, something really beautiful came out of it.
Mhm.
And family, I really want y'all to hear that, because as somebody who's in a lot of accelerators, I go and apply to a lot of things because there's always something more to learn, right? I also show up to meet people. Like, in this life, none of us were created to do this alone, and that includes our art. And
Right.
often we're better when we work together. So I think it's
Yeah.
really dope that out of like a crappy situation came this beautiful partnership that has now created a really awesome product, which is Red for
Yeah.
Revolution. I think that's pretty cool.
And it didn't happen immediately. I mean, that was 2 months of wasted of my time, but also quick depression right after. And then like we didn't embark on this project until a year later. So we definitely got the victory in the end, but sometimes those victories happen over time. It's not always immediate.
That part. That part. What they say, joy in the morning. The morning
Yes.
might be 5 years later, 10 years later. We don't know when the morning is. Okay,
We
let's
don't
be clear.
know.
We don't know. Nobody knows when the morning is. But when it comes, it's like everything becomes a lot clearer.
Yeah.
Uh, and then speak about timeline. Can you start from when you wrote the short to
Mm.
when you met Renee to when you all actually started production?
I wrote the short in what, 2017?
Wow.
I believe 2017, 2018, I'm working on the short. I met Renee, oh goodness gracious, was it 2021
Okay.
perhaps? I think I met Renee in 2021, yeah. And by meet her, like we had a phone call maybe once or twice. So that was the extent of us knowing each other. And then I I started writing, adapting the audio drama in 2022, and I met Renee. I had another conversation with her in 2022. We sort of embarked on production the top of 2023, and yeah, this is a almost 3-year journey of trying to produce this project. We encountered 2 strikes. So the WGA strike happened, the
Mhm.
actor strike happened while we were in production. We were still in the pandemic when I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but we had to send and deliver COVID tests to our talents' homes when we started. That was probably the most expensive thing in the budget. Yeah, so there
Wow.
we it was 3 years of production and essentially, a lot of work, but here we are.
Here you are. And I always like to know a creator's timeline because we all just see the end,
Right.
right? I feel like it's when you watch people play sports on television. All you see is the end, like what's happening right in front of you. We don't always get to hear the whole story. Because family, I know if you're watching this, it's because you're probably on your journey of your own. And I think the lesson here is that just stay on the journey because you really just
Hmm.
don't know where it's going to take you and who you're going to meet along the way that'll help you bring it to life. Right. And so, gosh, 3 years of production, but you started in 2017. I mean, I think that.
Yeah.
And also, when I hear that, I think the person you were in 2017 is also a pre COVID Jana, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so much life happens in between then and adapting it for the audio drama in and of itself. Gosh, there's so much there. But family, I ain't gonna hold y'all long. While I was listening to all 6 parts, one thing that really stood out to me as somebody who grew up in music and loving music was this original music that was happening throughout the course of the project. We talk about podcasting and audio dramas. music licensing is huge part of this whole jam.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when was the decision made to say, no, we're going to do original music? This is an important part. And we're going to figure out how to make that happen.
Doing original music was not in the original plan. We were solely going to do jazz standards, but as you mentioned, music licensing that we couldn't afford to. It just
Mhm.
is a ridiculous amount of money to essentially license music from Black people who don't own the rights to their music. So that we had to essentially create original music because it's a huge feat. Music licensing is a huge feat. And so we're grateful for the songs that we could license. The covers that did make it into the show are really great. Shout out to all of those folks who granted us licensing for the music that did make it into the show, but for the songs we couldn't license, we essentially had to pivot and write original music under a very short amount of time. And thankfully, we have a phenomenal Grammy Award winning musical director, Tammy Hall, who composed. She's a phenomenal pianist, a phenomenal director. She assembled an all women's jazz band, and we recorded the music primarily in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Shout out to 25th Street Studios. We have this phenomenal band who came together to essentially create the music, and it's just they're doing jazz, they're improvising, and it was just phenomenal. 2 days in the studio. Renee sang all of the songs in 2 days. And then Jordan Hall and Loretta Devine also sing in the show. And so they came in and recorded their music as well. But it was 2 days in the studio, and Tammy and I, we wrote the songs in a relatively short period of time. She composed it like a genius. I would send her some words, and then she would like have a song the next day, and
Wow.
it was honestly probably one of the most magical parts of this entire process.
It sounds magical. I'm sitting here thinking this is the epitome of Black girl magic.
Yeah.
What? Okay, any time frame here from the time y'all started writing and then it was just 2 days in the
Yeah,
studio.
two days in the studio. I don't. It was like kind of sporadic. And honestly, the music came about whenever we found out we couldn't license a song. So initially, episode one was called Revolution, and I wanted us to do the Revolution, the cover, the Nina Simone cover, but obviously can't license that. So I then wrote Revolution, sort of inspired by that song. Revolution will not be televised, and then similarly with all the other songs, it's like, oh, we can't license this one, so now we have to pivot and like write something. So we would try to write something in a similar tonality. It sort of came up sporadically as soon as we got either a no or we found out something cost too much money.
Come on. The power is in the pivot. The power every single
Yeah.
time when I talk to people, it is in the pivot. I
Yeah.
mean, you get a no and you figure it out.
Yes.
And in you all's case, you're a writer and you have a Grammy award winning composer who was just like, I got this. I mean, I
Yep.
think that makes it extra special.
It does. It really, really does.
You got to tell me, how did Adrienne Marie Brown end up as the opening voice to every episode?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for asking this question because no one's asked this yet.
How could they not?
Not. How has no one asked about Adrienne Marie Brown, our sonic goddess, literally? In a nutshell, it's all quite rather simple. She has a website and like a form where you could go get in touch, contact me, and then you fill that out. I also think I think there was like a mutual connection between Renee and a close friend of Renee's that sent a note as well. Essentially, there is a contact me form on a lot of people's websites, and then you could email them and see if they will be open to being in your project. Adrienne Marie Brown, she's someone we invited to be a part of this towards the very end, had wrapped production and had essentially put most of the show together. Reached out to her. We were trying to figure out if we wanted to. Everything about this project is so intentional. And so we sort of wanted to have, if possible, someone in the community, an activist of some kind to sort of speak life into and over the project and over listeners as they are listening, sort of introducing folks to the show, but also leading them out of the show. Who better than Adrienne Marie Brown? And honestly, we have a phenomenal cast. And I had some form of an emotional reaction to bringing everyone on board, but I don't think I was as excited with anyone as I was with Adrienne Marie Brown, because you would have thought that we had casted Frederick Douglass. I was like, I can't believe we have a real life abolitionist on the project. You would have thought like Harriet Tubman was in the room. And I am someone who has a number of abolitionist friends, but it was something about, sort of telling the story and being in the entertainment sector, talking about justice in a sincere and productive way doesn't happen a lot. So to have someone who's actively in community and actively fighting against these systems of dominance and white supremacy sort of come in and lend their voice to the project was so amazing. Anyway, so we're very glad to have Adrienne Marie Brown. She's great. I was actually the most fun fact, I didn't eat for like a year because that's just what happens when you're like directing something apparently. But that was one of the most chill sessions that we've had, and I got to eat lunch that day, and so that meant a lot. But anyway, Andrea Marie Brown is great. Please listen to the show, and you can just sort of hear the warmth and just the love and healing energy in her voice. It's really a great way to set the tone for the show.
It really is. And did you all call her a sonic goddess? Was that?
Yeah, yes.
Did you
I
just
think
come up
she
with
came
that?
up with that. I don't remember who came up
Oh.
with that. I think she said that jokingly and we kept it for real. Like I think, and she like there were so many titles that we had her like we're recording a bunch of random stuff. So can you say this? Can you try this? Can you try this? I think she just said that as a joke when we were like, we don't know what to call you or like what this is actually. And
Yeah.
then, but that's the one that I kept in the show. Yeah.
I'm glad you did. I think it's unique. I think it's way better than moderator, okay?
Right,
Or
exactly. Or
voice
host or
announcer.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So for sure.
Now, let's get back to all these celebrities that ended up in this project that all said yes to independent creators because they connected with the story in one way, shape, or form. How in the world do you go about landing a Loretta Devine and a Jordan Hole and a Rutina Wesley and I mean, even Danny Glover, Jennifer Beals. I mean, I could literally go on and like the song, like
Right, like
this
Erica
thing.
Badu. Oh my God.
And as independent creators, podcast creators, out here, this is what people dream about.
Yeah.
Was this on a vision board somewhere? And you was like, I don't know how. I don't know when. Reminds me of 2 a.m. Ricky's meditation affirmation that he does. But how in the world this come about?
Yeah, it was really quite divine. I do have to give credit to Renee again because essentially, like I said, I wanted to do this project by myself in a closet. So I think I would have just called in friends who don't act at all to be in this. But I did have a pitch deck, and essentially everyone who was in the cast, even when I was going to do this in the closet, were in that pitch deck. You just never think that those people are going to be the ones you end up casting for real. But Renee really believed that we could get these folks sort of despite our limitations. And we essentially reached out formally to everyone well, maybe not everyone, but for the most part, we did reach out to folks' reps that those things are easy to find if you have IMDb. But because we are an independent project and we don't have a lot of money behind us, there could be a lot of gatekeeping around talent, and everyone has their standards and that sort of thing. So we did have to sort of see how many degrees of separation we were from each person, and if we knew somebody who knew someone, if somebody's hair braider knew somebody's makeup artist, knew somebody's cousin, that sort of thing. And one thing usually led to another, led to a next, and that's essentially how we ended up with this cast. It was all quite random. We met Danny Glover at an event and like ended up at dinner with he and his friends, and Jennifer
That just
Beals.
randomly happens in LA. I just want y'all to know, family, this is a very LA story, okay? This is what happens in LA. It doesn't happen in New York. It don't happen in Chicago like this, okay? Only in LA do people like Danny Glover just randomly hang out because this is where they live. They just outside. It is very normal. Okay, I just want to say that because I think this is amazing and hilarious all at the same time because this is such an LA story. I loved it.
Yeah, definitely. It would just be stuff like that.
I think your audacity to dream this big, right? To put these folks in a pitch deck, and then out of an awful situation, it sounds like, and a waste of time. Find Renee. And Renee also have the audacity to dream this big and then to figure it all out and to make it happen. Because I know how crazy my schedule is. Now, to get all these people in the room, so you all posted some pictures of the actual production and standing in the room with people and doing the lines and recording together. I mean, it takes some fortitude and some belief that you can make it happen. And you all did. And I think that that is really, really dope.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really do. Now, how can people support the project?
Well, people can support the project by listening wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, particularly Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Make sure you leave a review. Leaving a review matters so much. People in the podcast space probably know that, but we did not know how much leaving reviews on Apple and Spotify matter. So that is a big, if you could go leave a review after you listen to the show on Spotify and Apple, would be really great. We have a website, redforrevolution.com. If you want to see more stories, if you want a season 2, if you would like to see other iterations of this, you can donate. I believe there's a space to donate on our website. And listening to the show, telling a friend, word of mouth goes a long way. We saw that with the success of Bronzeville a number of years ago, a pioneer podcast, audio drama. And so we sort of want to have a similar impact. We want just as many people to listen to our show. So listening and telling a friend, telling your grandmother, telling your auntie, your cousins, like, listen to the show, sending them the links, following us on Instagram and, all the other social media platforms, signing up for our newsletter, which you can do through our website, redforrevolution.com, subscribing to our YouTube channel. Those things all matter. Every listener, every like, every share, every comment matters so much. There are people with, saying power, hiring power, who pay attention to those things. So it really matters a lot that people sort of show up and show out and just let the world know that they love this story and they want to see more or hear more of it, rather.
Absolutely. So you all are doing this project independently, but then it lands with Radiotopia. And family, if you don't know Radiotopia, they are like sisters with PRX. It's where they're another set of projects live within the PRX family. So how did you all get connected with Radiotopia to distribute it through there?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So shout out to Renee's dear friend and one of the folks who consulted on the show, Ari Golden. She initially connected us to PRX before we started production. And we actually pitched the show to a number of people before we did it independently, and just everyone said no. So they knew about the project because Ari had mentioned that she had, essentially sent over our pitch deck. We had conversations with them after we circled back and after we finished production and had a couple conversations. But then we went to Tribeca and we had our premiere and our debut at the Tribeca Festival, who does audio storytelling now. And, everyone's in the room, and we actually won the top prize in our category in independent fiction at Tribeca. And essentially a number of people, including PRX and Radiotopia, got to see us win that award, and they got to see in real time how excited people were and just the real time response to the show. There was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around it. And so I think that also helped to sort of accelerate the process. But shortly after Tribeca, we entered into more discussion and ultimately landed with Radiotopia. And it turned out to be really great because that was a company from the very beginning. PRX is an institution that was at the top of our list. And so that's who we ended up with in the end.
I hope y'all all took notes, okay? I hope you had your notebook out. You hear me? And just made some notes about how this all came about. Pitching is not easy, all right? They got a lot of notes in the beginning. Tribeca, I love that they are including audio now as a part of their offerings when it comes to storytelling. And when you apply to Tribeca, it can't be anything that's ever been released ever before. Nobody could have heard it before in the public before pitching to Tribeca, right? And so when you're thinking about your future creations, think about that, because Tribeca is a wonderful place to premiere your work if you're in the fiction space, in the same way that Jana and the team did with Red for Revolution, because then you get other ears and people perk up when they see other people are excited. It's tough if the person you're pitching to doesn't understand the story, doesn't relate to it, can't see themselves in it. then they're not sure if their audience can see themselves in it. But when they're in a room full of other people who are just as excited and they're like, wait, should I be excited? They begin to reevaluate the story and the viability of its audience. And so I think that that is a really wonderful, powerful story, family, out there on how you can get your projects to a yes. Chile. It's inevitable get the no's, okay? But to stay committed to getting the yeses. Jana, just one more question. I know earlier you mentioned how you went through different phases of writing and how you decided that you really, because of the climate of the country, that you really wanted to focus on queer liberation based upon the homophobia and the transphobia that continues to happen right now as we sit here doing this interview together. Can you tell me more about why that particular storyline was so important for you to tell?
What is interesting about that question is that you pose, why is it important for you? I can tell you why it is just important.
Okay. All right. I'll take it. I'll take why it's important. I'll take that.
Why is it important? Because essentially queer folks, trans folks, gay, lesbian, bisexual, asexual, intersex, everyone deserves that, is worthy of justice and dignity, self-determination in their human rights. And so to be in the constant perpetual cycle of experiencing violence and injustice is a lot. And on the macro level, but then with respect to these stories and media, those things are also important. Sort of the narratives, where everything is about narrative, everything's made of. So when we're speaking about what type of stories are we telling and what narratives do we want to put out in the world, particularly about Black and brown queer folks, it's no small order with respect to a number of images and different things that we see in the media that sort of contribute to the harm in our communities is something that I wanted to combat. So it's important for the simple fact of, queer folks deserve rights and justice and humanity and of great storytelling. Why is it so important to me? I don't necessarily think it's any more or less important than my other political commitments, whether it's abolition, we spoke about abolition earlier, or it's, the liberation of Palestine, the liberation of Black and brown people, of immigrant folks. I sort of have a passion for a number of these different things that sort of meet at different intersections, and different things move me at different times. And in 2022, I was just overwhelmed. And so I sort of turned that anger and overwhelmed into this project, but I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't tell you what's stirring up and the purpose behind it. But I do think that everything's divine, and essentially whatever God wants me to do while I'm here with the time that we have, I just want to do that. And I do think that putting this together is one of those things. And now it's out in the world.
It's definitely out in the world. And I'm glad you listened. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you listened. And I'm glad this work is out in the world now. So family, here's the deal. You already heard what Jana said. There is like a myriad of ways in which you can support this work right now. But start by visiting redforrevolution.com. Start there and do all the things that Jana said. Okay? We believe in you.
Yes.
All right?
We do.
We believe in you. And Jana, thank you for creating this work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
This is Queer Radio Done Right.